Bonjour, je m'appelle Denis Babin, je serai le modérateur pour cette conférence de presse. Avant de commencer, nous avons quelques mesures préventives importantes à communiquer pour prévenir les incidents acoustiques perturbateurs et potentiellement dangereux susceptibles de causer des blessures. Nous rappelons à tous les participants de garder leur oreillette éloignée de tous les microphones à tout moment. When you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Ces mesures sont en place afin de protéger la santé et la sécurité de tous les participants, y compris les interprètes, et que nous puissions exercer nos activités sans interruption. Merci à tous pour votre coopération. Today, Vancouver East MP Jenny Kwan will announce her intention to introduce a private member's bill to close the loophole in Canada's arms exports laws in this upcoming parliamentary session. L'annonce de Mme Kwan sera suivie de questions des journalistes. Nous commencerons avec les gens dans la salle, suivis des journalistes en ligne sur Zoom. Mme Kwan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here at the National Press Gallery. I'm joined today by three powerful voices who have worked tirelessly to expose how Canada's permissive arms trade fuels human rights abuses abroad. Michael Bueckert, acting president of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. James Kafieh, from the Palestinian Canadian Congress. And last but not least, James Yap on Zoom, a lawyer representing applicants in the federal court case challenging Canadian arms exports to Israel. I thank each of them for their courage and commitment. In 2019, Canada signed onto the Arms Trade Treaty. We promised accountability. We promised that Canadian weapons would not end up in the hands of those who bomb civilians, starve communities, or violate human rights. But here's the truth. Loopholes and half measures have turned those commitments into empty words. The most glaring loophole is this. Canadian-made arms and components can be sent to the United States without a permit, no questions asked. Once there, they are folded into larger weapons systems and shipped off to conflict zones, including Israel, where those weapons are being used right now against civilians in Gaza. Canada tell the world that we have strong laws and regulatory provisions, but in practice, our bullets, our parts, our technology are flowing through the back door of the U.S. into some of the bloodiest conflicts on earth. Let's be clear. While children are being pulled from rubble, while families are being bombed and starved, weapons and components manufactured in Canada are still being used. This is totally unacceptable. And what makes it even worse, at the same time, this government is looking to jack up defense spending to 5% of GDP. Billions and billions of dollars for weapons, while ordinary Canadians are told there's no money for affordable housing, no money for pharmacare, no money for education, no money for the very things that families depend on. This is a question of priorities. The Liberals are supporting human rights violations abroad through legislative loopholes, while cutting social spending here at home. And this is not the Canada people believe in. Project Plowshares revealed last year that the Canadian Commercial Corporation, a Crown corporation acting in our name, signed a contract for nearly $80 million in artillery propellants, destined for the U.S., with some parts of those shipments ending up in Israel. And this was just weeks after the government claimed that it was intervening to stop a sale of mortar cartridges. This is complicity. Every bullet that leaves Canada and lands in the hands of human rights abusers is a betrayal of international law, of our commitments, of Canadians who want no part in war crimes. Enough is enough. Canadians do not want their country complicit in atrocities. That is why, when Parliament resumes later this month, I will introduce a private member's bill to close the U.S. loophole once and for all, as civil society organizations have been calling for. My bill will ensure Canadian arms exports to the United States are treated the same as any other country, subject to risk assessments, permits, and transparency requirements. This is not optional. It is a moral imperative. Protecting human rights is not a partisan issue. It is our responsibility as Canadians and as members of the international community. The UN Human Rights Council, independent UN experts, and civil society organizations have been here in Canada crystal clear to say, halt arms transfers that fuel violations of humanitarian laws. Today, I'm echoing that call. Canada must act. Closing this loophole is about making our words mean something, about refusing to profit from bloodshed and the killings of civilians, including children and women. It is about ensuring Canada is never complicit in atrocities. And to my colleagues in Parliament, regardless of what political party they belong to, please, when the bill is introduced, I ask you to support this bill. Let's put an end to this shameful chapter in our export controls. And thank you for being here today. And once again, my deepest gratitude to Michael and to James for standing with me today. With that, I'm going to pass the floor over to Michael.
Thank you, and good morning. On behalf of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, I want to thank Ms. Kwan for her leadership in bringing forward this important bill. The No More Loopholes Act, if adopted by Parliament, would make significant progress in ending Canadian complicity in Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. In March of last year, Parliament voted to stop the transfer of military goods to Israel. Recent polling shows that Canadians want their government to do more. But despite this clear mandate to take meaningful action against the Canada-Israel arms trade, major loopholes allow Canadian weapons to flow freely into a context of genocide. Unfortunately, a major part of Canada's exports operates under a veil of secrecy. Although Canada has paused some export permits for military goods being sent directly to Israel, an unreported volume continues to be transferred to Israel by way of the U.S., and in doing so, it goes unregulated and without the proper human rights assessment. This is a long-standing problem, which has been repeatedly raised by civil society. In 2018, Canada joined the Arms Trade Treaty, which aims to uphold the highest standards in regulating the arms trade. At that time, however, Canada made a decision not to adopt the treaty in full, but instead maintained its exemptions for exports to the U.S. We warned at the time that by keeping these loopholes, the majority of Canada's military exports would be left unregulated and unreported. As such, Canada failed to fully align itself with its international obligations under the treaty. This failure has left us with a grave problem today. The United States is an active facilitator of Israel's genocide, providing billions of dollars in military aid to Israel to the military every year. Most of Canada's arms exports are routed through the U.S., with no vetting or safeguards to prevent made in Canada weapons and components from being included in U.S. military aid packages or commercial shipments to Israel or other murderous regimes. And this is not a speculative concern. 1 year ago, we learned that General Dynamics in Quebec won a contract with the U.S. government to provide high explosive mortar cartridges to the Israeli military. While the Liberal government eventually promised to step in and stop it from going ahead, we only found out about the sale in the first place because of the press release from the U.S. government. It's completely unreported otherwise. And this is not the only example involving this same factory. We also know that significant Canadian technology is critical to the production of F-35 fighter jets, which are assembled in the U.S. before being transferred to Israel, making Canada a key enabler of the relentless airstrikes that Israel deploys to wipe out entire families. We cannot delegate our arms control responsibilities to the United States. Canada has a legal obligation to ensure that its exports are not being used to violate human rights or international law. We simply cannot entrust the U.S. to make these moral and legal decisions for us. That's why we must close these loopholes and finally assert control over where Canadian-made weapons are allowed to go. So we look forward to the introduction of this bill, and we urge the cooperation of members of all parties to ensure its rapid adoption. Canadians do not want to be partners in genocide, and this bill is the necessary first step. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Over to you, James.
Thank you, MP Kwan, for your leadership and for bringing forward this effort. On behalf of Palestinian Canadian Congress, I stand in full support of the push to close the loopholes that have allowed Canadian weapons to end up in Israel and be used against Palestinian civilians. For almost 2 years, Palestinians in Gaza have endured the unbearable. Entire families have been wiped out. Hospitals, schools, mosques, and churches have been reduced to rubble. At least 60,000 people have been killed, including more than 18,500 children. Thousands more remain under the rubble. And many estimates put the real death toll in the hundreds of thousands. Every Palestinian family, here and abroad, have felt this pain deeply, and many Canadians have been deeply distraught by our government's complicity. It's not enough to express concern while Canadian arms continue to flow directly and indirectly to those committing these crimes. Canada must take responsibility for the role our policies play and ensure they reflect our values. International humanitarian law is clear. No country should provide weapons when there is a clear risk they will be used to commit atrocities, including genocide. Canada cannot call for peace with one hand while fueling genocide with the other. By supporting this initiative, Parliament has the opportunity to draw a line and say, Canada will not be complicit. Canada will not allow loopholes to undermine accountability. Canada will choose justice and protection of life over profit and political convenience. To MP Kwan, we thank you for your courage, and to every member of Parliament, we urge you to support this effort and to stand with Palestinian civilians, not only in words, but in action. This is Canada's chance to live up to its role as a country committed to human rights and to help bring an end to a genocide that has gone on for far too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we'll go to James on Zoom. James Yap.
Thank you, Jenny Kwan, Michael Bueckert, and James Kafieh for your powerful words and actions. My name is James Yap. I'm an international human rights lawyer representing a group of Palestinian and Canadian individuals and NGOs who've brought an application in federal court challenging the Canadian government's continuing arms exports to Israel. The consensus of leading international legal experts is clear and overwhelming. Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. The United States provides 70% of the arms imports that Israeli forces use to carry out this genocide. In turn, the U.S. military industry relies on arms exports from Canada to meet this demand for implements of war in Israel, including parts and components that go into building and maintaining some of the most destructive weapons used in Gaza, such as the F-35, F-15, and F-16 assault aircraft, and the Apache AH-64 assault helicopter. This is why MP Jenny Kwan's proposed measures to close this loophole are so desperately needed. The International Criminal Court, by its own rules, prosecutes only, quote, the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole. The court, of which Canada is a founding member, has issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing him of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And yet Canada continues to arm the government he leads and enable the ongoing crimes he commits. As the Supreme Court of Canada said in the case of R.V. Cowan, quote, the person who provides the gun is guilty of the same offense as the person who pulls the trigger. In the same way, the Canadian government, by materially enabling the Israeli government's crimes, is complicit in those same crimes. Continuing arms exports to Israel is not just immoral, it violates both domestic and international law. It violates the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees fundamental human rights, such as the right to life and the right to equality, to all persons regardless of their nationality. The Charter is designed to promote and protect the core values shared by all of Canadian society, and therefore commands respect from our government. Continuing arms exports to Israel also violates Canada's obligations under established rules of international law agreed to by the international community. In a ruling issued last year, the International Court of Justice called on all countries of the world to honor their obligations relating to the transfer of arms to parties to an armed conflict in order to avoid the risk that such arms might be used to violate the Geneva Conventions. 3 UN bodies have specifically called out Canada for failing to stop arms exports to Israel through the US. The UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination have all called on Canada to fulfill its obligations under international law and close this loophole. Right now, it's more critical than ever that Canada do its part to uphold its commitments to the international rule of law. Jenny Kwan's proposed legislation will help bring Canada back in line with its international obligations. Thank you.
Media are now invited to ask questions. We'll start with people in the room, followed by those online. Mark Ramsey, Toronto Star.
Thank you all for being here. I'll start with Mr. Yap. Can you just update us on the court case from your clients about the weapons and how that case is going so far?
Yeah, the court case is in preliminary discussions over the scope of the disclosure that the government has to turn over to the applicants. The government has been able to substantially delay proceedings by raising objections relating to national security and business confidentiality of documents. We are doing our best to push through these delays and push the litigation ahead as quickly as possible in order to get this issue to court as quickly as possible. And if you want any further, more specific updates, you're welcome to get in touch with me by email.
Thank you for that. And maybe just a question to anyone. You mentioned kind of the veil of secrecy and how kind of a lot of the arms exports to the U.S. can be unreported and unregulated. Do you have, aside kind of from the high-profile cases that you mentioned, any data or other examples of this happening? And if not, what does that say about this idea of the secrecy and how big of a barrier that is to actually have accurate information about how big a problem these things are, or when policies are violated and such?
Maybe I'll start and then we'll turn to Michael for that question. as has been indicated, we are getting the information and snippets of the information, not from the Canadian government, of how Canada's weaponry, arms, parts, components are being used and is primarily being used through the United States. There's been a number of different reports that has been issued, and that data provides that information to verify that. I'm going to let Michael to sort of get into further details around that. And I think the problem here fundamentally is this. The Canadian government, while on the one hand said that they have closed the loopholes, that they're not doing this. In fact, just before the exposure of what's happened, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs actually said on the public record that they have stopped this from happening, that there was intervention from the Canadian government. Turns out it's not true. They are not telling Canadians the truth about what's happening, and that's got to stop. So I'm going to turn to Michael.
To reiterate the problem a little bit, unlike other countries that Canada exports military goods to, the U.S. is totally unreported. So, you know, with other countries, Canada issues a report every year that says what country Canada exported goods to, what category of military goods they are, the number of permits used, the number of permits revoked, all sorts of data. Still not close to enough. It's not very transparent, but it is some sense in general of the amount of military goods. With the U.S. is excluded from that list, so it's completely off the books, which means that we really have no idea. We're not tracking or reporting or assessing where any of those goods are flowing, and obviously that's a huge portion of Canada's military exports. So it's just a black hole, and we only find out about real case examples through almost by accident, because the U.S. government puts it in a press release, or because we find out that the Canadian Crown Corporation, Canadian Crown Corporation has brokered a deal with the U.S. government for artillery propellant as last year. We know, generally speaking, about the F-35 fighter jet program because there's a lot of Canadian companies that participate in that. And I know that we're doing a lot of research right now to find, to dig further into the scope of the problem. But the real issue is that Canada is deliberately keeping this huge chunk of military good exports off the books completely, leaving Canadians in the dark, which means that we can't really make informed policy decisions about this. And really, we are just delegating the responsibility for this to the United States, thinking that this is safe. It's safe to dump weapons into the U.S., and they can make responsible decisions after that. I think, you know, history has shown that that's completely false, and especially with the U.S. government that we see now, it just makes no sense.
I would just add one thing to that. The U.S. is a huge problem in the weapons trade, and I think this is why this legislative initiative of MP Kwan is so important. But we have to understand that even the trade that we're told about that is direct, for example, the sale of bullets to Israel, 500,000 since the beginning of this genocide, 177,000 just in April of this year alone, and the minister says nothing's being sold that could be used in Gaza. Even if you could believe a commitment from the state of Israel that the bullets wouldn't be used in Gaza, are they being used in the West Bank? Are they being used by settlers and the army to terrorize Palestinian civilians there? Do they not free up other bullets that could be used in Gaza? There is a huge gap in the credibility of our government. We're being gaslit, and it needs to come to an end.
And if I may, I'll just add that every time we get information on a transaction on this piecemeal basis, every time the value of that single transaction dwarfs the entire total value of all the goods sent directly to Israel from Canada in a year. So that gives you an idea of the scale of this loophole, which it's so big, it's not really a loophole at all. It's in many ways the primary trade in arms from Canada to Israel.
Inès Lombardo, Franco Presse.
Oui, bonjour. Merci à vous quatre. Je vais poser ma question en français. Merci à vous quatre d'être là. Ma première question, ça va être pour vous, Madame Kwan. Vu que le NPD n'est plus un parti officiel à la Chambre des communes, comment est-ce que vous allez assurer que votre projet de loi passe? Est-ce qu'il y a des discussions qui sont en cours avec d'autres partis à la Chambre? Et ma question concerne les libéraux et les conservateurs, évidemment.
Well, thank you very much for that question. You're correct. We do not, the NDP, as a party without party status, have your normal rotation of opposition bills or motions. That said, what we do have is a system where MPs' names are thrown into a draw in the beginning of every sitting of Parliament after the election. And as luck would have it, after waiting 10 years, my name finally got drawn early enough that where I can table a bill or motion, that it will be voted on. I am amongst the top 30 of the draw, number 27 to be very specific. So I am expecting that my name and my bill will be debated in the House of Commons and it will be voted on. What is most important, of course, is this. At this moment in time, we know what is going on. We're seeing what's going on. And Canada is complicit. Canada is complicit in the killings and the dying and the genocide that's taking place. Will we take action? Will each member of Parliament stand up and be counted in this moment in time? I've been elected for over 30 years. And there are important things to which we need to do, and that's why we run for office. And to have this opportunity, having waited 10 years, and I considered a variety of different possible actions. I am very passionate about housing. That was the thing when the federal Liberal government canceled the National Affordable Housing Program that brought me into electoral politics. And I could have done something on that, and I desperately want to. Let me be clear. I'm the immigration critic. And given the anti-immigrant sentiments that's going on right now, that's escalating, I'm desperate to do something on that. But at the end of the day, I've decided to do it on this, to close the loopholes. Why? Because Canada cannot and must not be complicit in human rights violations, in violation of the Arms Trade Treaty, in violation of humanitarian laws, in the face of what's going on right now. This bill must be tabled, and I hope all members of Parliament, regardless of what party they're from, that they will support it.
Puis ma deuxième question, ça va concerner Est-ce que je voulais savoir si les tarifs, en ce moment, qui occupent une énorme place au Parlement et dans la politique fédérale en général, est-ce que ça pourrait justement bloquer le Canada pour agir, pour aller de l'avant avec un projet de loi par rapport à l'arrêt d'envoi d'armes via les États-Unis à Israël?
Right now, as it stands, the current law is such that the arms is routed through to the United States. They are not required to provide a permit. Once it's on American soil, the Americans can do what they will. And Canada kind of just turns a blind eye to all of that. And so when I say that I intend to introduce a piece of legislation that will close that loophole, that means that Canada cannot allow for that to continue. That means the United States will be subjected to the same provisions that's being applied to other countries when we're exporting arms. So that's what I think needs to be done. Right now, as it stands, the Canadian government, of course, if they wanted to, they can exercise their authority to stop this. But they've chosen not to. And worse than that, they've chosen to hide it, to not be clear and transparent with the Canadian public. We're only finding out what's going on by happenstance. And so that has to end. So that's why I think this bill is going to be critical, that we have to close this loophole and to ensure that the United States, and any other country for that matter, has to abide by Canada's commitment in honoring the Arms Trade Treaty.
Maybe if I could, I think we're all afraid that the government could use tensions with the U.S. as an opportunity to push this off the table, to try to make us stop talking about this. I think that would be very unfortunate, but it'd also be illegal. We're talking about treating the United States to a double standard in our arms control system, where we don't subject it to the same provisions as any other country. And this is actually against the Arms Trade Treaty itself, which requires that arms are controlled in a consistent and non-discriminatory manner. What Canada is doing, the way that Canada treats the U.S. is nothing but discriminatory. It holds it aside and says that the rules don't apply to you. And I think if we're using political tensions as an opportunity to throw that aside, I think that would really be a scandal. I think it would really be a total failure to uphold international standards. But that doesn't mean they won't try it. But I think Canadians want this. Canadians, if you look at polling, they want their government to do more. They're not going to let the Liberal government get away with throwing up their hands and saying we can't do anything.
Dylan Campbell Robertson, Canadian Press.
Hi there. Thanks for taking our questions. I'm wondering, Ms. Kwan, what sort of outreach you've done with the other parties, if you've had any preliminary talks about this legislation and how it might be supported, and if the experience of the vote that we had back in March 24, if that might have informed the approach that you're taking now.
Thank you very much. The bill, of course, is still in the final drafting stages, and so we're going to engage in a fulsome process with members of Parliament. They will have a chance. I am sure all members of Parliament will say, I want to see the bill before they make any commitments. And so when the bill is tabled, they will be able to see that. I don't think it's a secret that there is a need for this. The NDP has been calling for ending the loophole, ending this situation, the complicity that is taking place with Canada. So it should not come as any surprise for any members of Parliament that this is what we're going to do. And as it happens after this last election, my name got drawn early enough that I feel confident that this will be voted on. And so I am going to do my best. I think in this moment in time in history, it is absolutely critical that we as members of Parliament be counted, that we be held to account on what we say, including the Prime Minister and the ministers. You don't get to say that you are not part of this atrocity if you're not going to vote for this bill. This is a moment in time where it will be recorded in history for generations to come, where people can see what did this Parliament do to stop the genocide, to stop the killing, and to say enough. And Canada will not be part of it. And there cannot be excuses be allowed to say, oh, but it's the United States. Ooh, we can't actually hold them to account. I'm sorry. Yes, you do. We have to hold everyone to account, to international law. So this is what we're doing. And members of Parliament, once the bill is tabled, I will be engaging with them. But aside from me, there will be civil society organizations. Some of them are sitting around me today. Many of them are not around this table. There is a huge onslaught of interest and intensity in the community in pushing this forward. If they don't listen to me, listen to them. Listen to the everyday Canadian. Listen to their constituents. They will be out there demanding action. They have already been out there demanding action. The time has come.
As a follow-up, Ms. Kwan, just seeking some clarity on the NDP stance on arms embargo writ large. My understanding is that this is sort of an interim proposal, but that the party still wants a full arms embargo with Israel. Please correct me if I got that wrong. And if that is the case, I'm wondering if that includes technologies like the Iron Dome defense.
I'm going to ask you to wait for the bill when it's introduced. Once it's introduced, you'll see the scope of the bill and what we're doing, and then we'll follow up.
The party policy is still a full arms embargo, no?
What this bill is going to be doing and what I intend to do with the bill is to close the loophole, as been mentioned. So this is what I'm proposing to do at the moment. And in terms of other policies further down the road, I'm going to defer.
David Thurton, CBC.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Ms. Kwan, I'm going to ask you your reaction to the Conservative leader's proposal to ban to scrap, the temporary foreign worker program. What's your reaction to that?
I'm going to suggest, if I may, to deal with questions that's outside of this issue after we're done the press event, if I may. I have lots to say about that, but I'm going to defer until we're done with this topic.
Okay, that's it for
me. There's nobody online. Oh, again?
Ms. Kwan, does the NDP want a full arms embargo?
Well, from my personal perspective, the short answer is yes. The longer answer, of course, is that at this juncture with my private member's bill, I'm going to advance what we can and to close the U.S. loophole.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramsey?
Just at the end there, you talked a lot about the idea that, just because it's the U.S. and we have kind of a sensitive relationship there, that some people might suggest, that we can't do this. And obviously you opposed that. I'm just curious, actually, if you could comment in general about how this relates to how Canada has or hasn't stood up to the U.S. on human rights issues beyond just Gaza, kind of with the attacks on the International Criminal Court, the ICJ. There's Canadians held in ICE detention, that kind of thing. What's your assessment of just broadly how Canada has, compared to Trump's first term, responded to human rights issues and that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. The United States, and particularly with this second administration with Trump, I think that they're showing the world more and more that, particularly in the areas of violation of basic human rights, and particularly in the areas of migrants, immigrants, that they cannot be trusted. We are seeing footage and imagery, reports, endless reports of those atrocious violations taking place right now. From my own personal perspective, it is my view that the USA is no longer a safe third country. That in and of itself is also a clear statement about their violation of basic human rights. There are Canadians being held in detention centers in the United States. There are people who have been rejected with their application to seek refuge here in Canada, where CBSA has perhaps misinterpreted or used misplaced technicalities in rejecting those applications under the Safe Third Country Agreement and not utilizing the exemptions appropriately. And that is all part and parcel of those violations. And so the Canadian government has chosen not to take action. But how long can the Canadian government keep their head in the sand when this is all happening? It's happening and is impacting Canadians right here and right now. In the case of the arms trade, how long can the Canadian government stick their head in the sand and pretend that we're not part of it, to pretend that we're not complicit? So that's why this is so critical, this bill that I'm going to be tabling, and for members of parliament to stand up and be counted.
Mr. Thurton?
Hi. Okay. So we can ask.
All right, we'll come back to your question, seeing so there's no other questions on this topic. On the issue around the temporary foreign workers, I think it's particularly ironic that the Conservatives, and particularly Pierre Poilievre, during the COVID period and even prior to the COVID period, both Liberals and Conservatives advocated strongly for Canada to expand the temporary foreign workers program. Why? Because it's a source of cheap labor, so that they can bring people in to do work, right? And they was advocating for that. And now he's turned into this, changed his position in utilizing this moment, this anti-migrant, anti-immigrant moment to further escalate the situation. The truth of the matter is that Canada's housing crisis is not the fault of migrants. It is not. It is the fault of successive Liberal Conservative governments' failed housing policies. Why do I say that? Because it was the federal Liberals in 1993 that canceled the National Affordable Housing Program. They stopped building social housing, co-op housing, stopped their partnership with the provinces and territories. And so then over time, we have an escalating housing crisis. Provinces, except for British Columbia and Quebec, continue to do social housing. All the other provinces weren't able to continue to do so. And to boot, not only did the government walk away from their fiduciary responsibility in building social housing, they then rely heavily on the private sector to deliver the housing that Canadians need. And the private sector, you know, to their own interest, build housing to maximize profit, housing that Canadians could not afford, right? So we have this escalating situation over time between Liberal Conservative governments. They even brought in a law that gave special treatment to real estate investment trusts so that they don't have to pay their fair share of taxes. All of this cumulated to this housing crisis is a set of failed housing policies that led us to where we are today. And it is so convenient for the Liberal government and for the Conservatives to blame migrants, to say it's your fault that we have this housing crisis. Well, they're not saying that when they were brought in here to Canada to provide cheap labor that the Canadian government wanted them to provide. So now, in this juncture, Poilievre is doing what Poilievre always does, always advancing policies to his own political interest, and to the core of it, it is not to benefit Canada. And if you end the temporary foreign workers program, there will be a huge fallout. First off, there are people who are here in Canada already, who are already doing that work. To abruptly end all of that, what will that mean? And what will that do to the Canadian economy? There is that question. There are those people where we promised them that if you came and worked here, there will be a pathway to permanent residency for you. And that too will end. That too will be taken away from them, and already has begun in that process. So they're not thinking about the people that will be impacted by this. They're only thinking what's politically convenient for them. And they think that it's popular to have this anti-immigrant sentiment and to fan it even further in his doublespeak. That is what's happening right now with Pierre Poilievre and his policy. And I don't think it's a secret. The truth is, the Conservatives for years and years wanted to shut down immigration and immigration rights. We've seen it, that over the years, it was them who actually ended various different programs. And it was them who took away the right of second generation born abroad to pass on their citizenship, and to take that right away where the courts had ruled that is unconstitutional. That was under the Conservatives that did that. So through history and through their approach, there's no coincidence, I think, that the Conservatives harbor these anti-immigrant, anti-migrant sentiments, and that they would only want to allow for migrants to come over when they think there's an advantage, that they can take advantage of them, to which is what's happened. And now I think he is taking the view that we're going to shut it all down and let's just continue on blaming the migrant community for the failed policies of government over decades between Liberals and Conservatives. That's what's happening right now.
And just finally, I'm just going to ask you a question about the NDP leadership race. There was a headline in a newspaper about candidates being required to get a number of signatures from non-men and other equity-deserving communities. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, the NDP leadership has made those determinations around the leadership rules. There are a number of them to which I have opinions about. But with that being said, I'm going to refrain from commenting about the leadership race or those rules that apply. I don't get to make those rules. And it's the executive and council from the NDP that gets to make those rules. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
So this was the last question for today. MP Kwan, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. And particularly, I want to extend my thanks to Michael and the two James for their participation. And with that, we will continue to work on this important file, and with any luck, fingers crossed, that members of Parliament, when this bill is introduced, will find the courage to do what is right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.